Hello, viewers. This is Opening Pathways with Tom Lenoble, and I'm really excited today. I have Jansen Durham from FIXA with me today, and they are doing something very interesting in Rwanda. Uh, Jansen, it's really great to have you with me.
Tom, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to our podcast. So I want to know what was the first thing that sparked your idea to start your business?
Yeah, of course. Well, it might be, helpful to provide a little bit of background and context,
I
specifically,
hope so.
myself. Yeah, but that might help just a little bit, right? But as by way of introduction, my name is Jansen. I'm originally from the United States, between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore City, to be exact. So spent most of my development years here. Even went as far as going to a small liberal arts institution in Western Massachusetts called Williams College. And during that experience, I ultimately had the opportunity and exposure to study and travel abroad to Africa. And I specifically chose Cape Town, South Africa, which I was really interested in learning more, but obviously going to check out how beautiful South Africa is. And I think in that experience, I really became infatuated with the culture, the vibrancy, but most importantly, the amount of technology and innovation, that was taking shape over there on the continent. So actually was fortunate enough to work at one of the fastest growing financial technology service companies in South Africa by the name of Yoko. I was connected with the CEO, Katlego, there, and we just really hit it off. And that opportunity to learn and be a part of something innovative, but also impactful, really spoke to me. And I think that's what truly inspired me to want to get my hands dirty, learn a little bit more about entrepreneurship, but most importantly, how could I impact as many people around the world as possible, specifically through technology and education. So, that's really where I kind of got my start, and I haven't looked back since.
And what about FIXA? Tell us how that started.
Yeah, so FIXA ultimately started because after that experience in South Africa, came back to the States, very rejuvenated, very inspired, as mentioned, really looking and peering into this idea of entrepreneurship, because it was quite new to me. And as I was, making my way around the campus and just kind of sharing my experience of being abroad, everyone told me that I had to meet this gentleman named Tafara because he was from Zimbabwe. He spent a year at the university, but then took some time off to actually go home and start a few startups, that were quite successful in the financial services space, the ride hailing space. And so someone was kind enough to make a warm introduction to Tafara. And we just really hit it off from the very beginning. And I believe this was in 2020, right before, COVID kicked off and right before, we graduated. But we really just bonded over this idea of, entrepreneurialism, impact, innovation, and really supporting Africa's youth and making sure that there were opportunities for people to be successful. And from then on, we just started to ideate. We started to connect ever so often, and just started to talk about what we could build together. And ultimately, Fixa, was the baby that came to life.
Great. So I'm curious, did you have early role models that prompted anything that you're doing today? Was there something happened early in your life that made all this kind of make sense later?
I would say, you know, role models, yes, definitely, in all phases and parts of my life. And obviously, my parents are a big part of that, setting up the environment and giving me the tools to be successful and be curious and ask questions. But outside of that, I would also love to kind of highlight that I played sports growing up, quite competitively and even at the university level. And I think that aspect of teamwork, of learning how to work hard, practice, repetition, competition, all these things I think embedded in me, wanting to strive to be the best that I can be at all times and always pushing others around me to be the best versions of themselves, in any capacity, but also leading by example. So I think, sports was a huge impact on me. Specifically, I played American football and was the quarterback throughout high school as well as into college. And then outside of that, specifically into role models or mentors, I think, again, there's been a lot of people, right? So I don't want
Good.
to discount that, but I think one of the more important individuals most recently was the gentleman I had spoke about, who was the CEO of the fintech company in Cape Town, South Africa. His name is Katlego Mapai. His father was actually my visiting professor at Williams College, which is how we were warmly introduced. But genuinely, again, being in that environment that he had curated in terms of the startup, the culture, the innovation, the mindset, right, the customer centricity, and really wanting to give back to those they served, I think really played a huge role in how I thought about building my organization, how I thought about building culture, how I thought about bringing opportunities and technology to the world to better people's lives, and then doing that at that kind of scale as well gave me the exposure to see that it was possible. And I think what I was most fond of and what really sold me was his ability to recruit and attract very like-minded, talented individuals who were coming together for a common cause and purpose. And that was outside of themselves and to really help others. So I think, those types of experiences, exposure, um, and conversations really enlightened me about, what could be possible, and ultimately even what is my purpose, right? Even asking myself that question and going a bit deeper. I believe that those two instances, football as well as the role model mentor Cathlega, were very instrumental in that, I believe.
And I'm sure you're inspiring others from some of those examples. Let's jump into FIXA. I want to
Yes.
know about a first challenge you had as a leader and that you had to face, and what did you do? What did it
Yeah.
teach?
Yeah, I mean, I think like most early stage startups, you have an idea, right? You're really holding on to that idea. You obviously want it to be successful. You maybe have communicated to investors or friends, peers, and you want to make whatever it is in terms of that idea come to life, but also make sure that it's successful. But ultimately, I think one thing I've learned very quickly in the startup world is that you can't necessarily be too stuck in one particular way of doing things, or even a particular way of approaching something. And so I think that idea of being flexible, but more specifically in the form of pivoting, right, from maybe the business model that we had originally kind of thought up or believed to be the one that would work best, was something that hit me quite hard. And I believe just kind of being attached emotionally, right, to that idea, wanting it to work, was maybe the hardest part. But as an entrepreneur, I think that's something that you have to learn early and often, right? Which is the customers are always right. Whatever that means, whatever that looks like, they're always
Yeah.
right. And so
Yeah.
being able to really just ask the hard questions, challenge myself, and just be a very objective about the best way to serve the customer, to understand the problems that they're facing, and to make sure that we're building a product that really suits their needs. I think was probably the biggest and hardest lesson I had to learn early and often. That really served us well today, because even as we stand today, we're very open-minded, right? We're always happy to experiment, to really ask the right questions, and really, come back to the question of, what are we really solving for? What is the pain point? And how can we truly bring the best product to life?
Did you ever doubt your vision? What did you do to get through it?
That's a great question. Um, there were times where your mind says some not too nice things. Let's call it like that. But I think that's a part of the process. Going through some of the ups, some of the downs, and ultimately when there are some down times, it's not all cherry and roses, and entrepreneurialism is not always as sexy and fun as it may sound, right? Because it's a very lonely path, right? And sometimes you don't have people that you can really share all of the relevant information and context with, to really get some of those additional insights and perspectives. So it's a grueling, lonesome journey, but one that I believe is very rewarding in the end.
Yeah, and if you share it with people that haven't been in a startup, they don't get it. And so you
No,
get
not at all.
nowhere. In fact, they give you information or even advice that has no sense in the startup world. It's a different kind of animal. I used to say if you didn't get your to-do list done today, throw it away because you have a whole nother one to do tomorrow that has nothing to do with what you
Exactly.
have today. So
Exactly.
yeah, so
Exactly.
tell me, what's been the biggest turning point for Fixa so far?
Yeah. I would say the biggest turning point, kind of goes back to that lesson I talked about, which is, the ability to pivot, be very open-minded, and really make sure that you're serving the customer to the best of your abilities. And so, I think, to answer your question, I'll even share a little bit more context about what FIXA does, and ultimately, come back to kind of answer that question. And so FIXA is ultimately, a digital neobank serving, Africa's masses, specifically those who are informally employed. And why this is important is because about 80% of the working age population in sub-Saharan Africa is informally employed. So how we kind of define that here at FIXA is that these individuals ultimately have no contractual agreement with their employers, so oftentimes getting paid in cash, no long-term engagements, and then no access to social benefits or financial services to help better themselves and their families. In short, what this looks like is just a lot of work is undigitized. And so, someone could be working as a mason or a carpenter or in a factory for 10 plus years, but have absolutely nothing to show for it. No CV, no LinkedIn account, right? No resume, no banking statements, right? Nothing that can absolutely verify this. And so our platform, or ultimately from the very beginning, we wanted to better understand, well, how can we help these young people um, access opportunities and the ability to uplift themselves, specifically through getting access to long-term decent work opportunities, but most importantly, access to financial services, social benefits, and even health insurance that can help themselves grow over time. And so what this looked like at the beginning of our journey was ultimately a staffing agency where we were ultimately supporting large scale construction contractors as well as large scale projects get access to temporary labor on demand. So we were ultimately the middleman connecting these two sides of the equation. And in that process, we were starting to ultimately build the digital resume and profile and CV on behalf of these informal and these gig workers. So ultimately tracking their skills history, their work history, and their earnings history to support them and now being able to access additional job opportunities, but also financial services and social benefits that would again help them benefit and grow and uplift themselves. And in that process, we ultimately built some really cool human resource and payroll technology that enabled us to take time and attendance, right? Run payroll, but also empower these same individuals with utilizing that data that we've collected and enabling them to now take out financial services such as salary advances or short-term loans, access microinsurance, which has historically been unavailable to these individuals and their peers, and even, of course, helping them to save for the future. And so that experience of really empowering these informal workers that we were working with, which was around 15,000 at the time, we realized that why should our impact be limited to 15,000 people? Why can't other employers utilize the same technology to not only optimize and more efficiently manage their workforce, but most importantly, be able to empower, the individuals who are providing the resources, that help their business grow over time. And so that's where we kind of took a small pivot where we licensed the software that we had built to third-party employers in Rwanda. And we now have some of the largest employers in the country utilizing this software, onboarding their workers and supporting them and now digitizing, their work history, their skills history, and their earnings history. And now being able to access services that have historically been unavailable to them. So it's really exciting to just see the impact that we have on people's lives and the ability that we're helping individuals through our platform grow. It's really empowering and it's been an awesome journey, but a long-winded way of ultimately coming back to answer your question that's one of the biggest decisions that we ultimately had to make was kind of pivoting, our existing business model to really see how we can support, others and being empowered. And that process was long, it was tedious, it was not easy, but it was well worth it. And we're really excited about the future, the growth potential, and all the impact that's yet to come.
Yes, Jansen, you're changing lives and giving people an identity. I
Yes,
want
sir.
you to tell me, please, what did those early days teach you about trust?
Mm. I would say in short, I believe trust is earned. I think it's something that is very vital and important for any healthy relationship, whether that's, within the organization, whether that's, me with my co-founder, right? And in personal relationships. But I leave that trust, really gives you the leeway to work with someone, not having to necessarily worry or second guess anything that they might say or do because you know that they always have the same morals, ideals, and values that have built the relationship, which is earned over time through that trust, And I think it's very vital for any long-term and in-depth relationship to have that. And I believe that's built up over time. I believe that's built up through communication,
Hmm,
and I believe that's built up through experience.
thank you.
Of course.
We live in a world where technology is moving faster than ever before. We're in the world of
Yeah.
AI, and it's
Yeah.
some people think we're all gonna gonna fail and gonna be the end of civilization. I happen to think we're on just the next bold, amazing change that's coming.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes, sir.
I'm curious, how do you balance
Mm.
innovation? How do you
Mm.
balance keeping up with all of that innovation and keeping the lights on with sustainability?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think from an innovation standpoint, you never want to be left behind, right? You don't want to be the guy with the horse and carriage while the Ford Motor Company cars are driving right past you, right? So I think it's a mindset of educating yourself, right? So, try to seek out as much knowledge that is relevant and applicable to your industry that can ultimately help you. I think it's important, that artificial intelligence supports entrepreneurs and organizations in optimizing a lot of processes that they have. So specifically administrative, maybe even some finance, that could allow for, more room for individuals to utilize their time to focus on more creative tasks, to experiment, right? To allow them to figure out what's next, rather than these very manual, tedious, time-consuming task that might be taking away, from the real creativity that that person has to offer, right? And so I think, AI in the short term is something that we can utilize to really optimize and allow for us to have more time given back to us, and then of course to deliver that to the customers, whether that's through particular customer search or excuse me, customer, questions or queries um, could be super helpful. But I think from a sustainability standpoint, I think the underlying problems that people are solving aren't necessarily changing, right? Again, they're utilizing AI to kind of optimize for workflows, for time, for compute that enables people to get their time back, right? And I think in Africa, it's a bit different, and it's super interesting to hear this AI conversation, not just around the world and the globe, right? But also seeing how it plays out in Africa as well, because I think Africa is a little bit behind in the AI world and the AI race. Whether it comes to data centers, compute, knowledgeable engineers, who would be able to even manage these types of systems. And so I think from a sustainability perspective, the way I see where things stand on the African continent is I still think we need to solve the very basic problems, right?
Mm.
AI is not going to help us build roads faster, right? AI is not going to help us build up infrastructure faster, right? I think, we're still a ways away from seeing that level of impact on a day to day. And I think we still have so much work to do with the basic necessities to ensure that, people individuals, small businesses, large businesses still have the necessary resources to be successful in delivering the goods and services that they do every day, right? And so, in short, I don't know if AI is the most important thing on the continent right now, specifically talking about Africa, if, certain individuals don't have roads, going towards their driveway, right? E-commerce will never take off if
Yes.
that's not the case or if that person doesn't have an address. So AI is a great buzzword. It's great to talk about, but I think we still need to focus on some of the more infrastructural things that would enable AI to, again, allow for us to optimize for the things that are to come.
Yeah, you remind my viewers that the world is a big place. We're not all in the same place.
Yes, sir.
I'd love to know what you've learned about building the leadership beneath you.
Ooh, that's a great one. I mean, I think we could go all day on this one. But I think I'm recognizing that a lot of my job at this stage is to really help people grow to become the best versions of themselves. But most importantly, a lot of the individuals that I work with on a day-to-day basis, I'm trying to build into the best leaders possible because at the end of the day, they have teams, right? They have people reporting to them. And it's important that they, understand how to coach, right? It's important that they know how to read the room, have empathy, sympathy, be able to communicate in a timely manner, set expectations very clearly. And all this is leadership, whether intangible or tangible, whether born with it or not, these are things that are required from any great leader that have people beside them, that are ready to go to war for them, right? And I think that requires us to be human. It requires us to show up each and every single day. It requires us to be vulnerable. It requires us to get to know people on a personal level and
Yes.
to understand them and how they tick. And I think that, it's something that takes time. And so, I'm trying to figure out now. It's a great question that you asked me at this particular point in time because, me and my chief of staff are trying to figure out, well, how do we develop leaders over time? And how do we develop a sustainable process that can be tried and true, and so that's something that I'm still trying to figure out as I myself am still trying to become the best leader that I can become and learn all the relevant knowledge and to access the resources that can help me
Yes.
to be the best version. But the way I look at it is if I'm not getting better each day, if I'm not being the best leader that I can for myself, then I'm even setting the bad example for the leaders underneath me. So again, I think it all starts and stops with me. And I try my best to set the example, but also articulate and communicate for people to be the best versions of themselves. Because what it means for me to be a leader or what that looks like might be different for someone else, right?
Yeah.
And we want people to feel as if they're leaders in their own right at any moment, whether that's an intern or senior manager, right? We want everyone to feel as if they can lead in any moment. So it's really just instilling confidence, but also giving people the access to the knowledge and the resources, and still trying to kind of figure out, how you do that in a very reproductive way. But it's something I think about very often. So
Yes.
long-winded way of saying I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that more.
Of course.
It's important to recognize that we're all individuals and we have different paths because
Yes, sir.
not everyone's going to be a CEO. Some people aren't aspiring to be that in their lives.
Sure. Sure.
So I'm curious, what values are non-negotiable in your organization?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for asking. I think some of the things that I've been saying over this conversation, I think first and foremost is communication. I think communication is of utmost importance in any successful relationship. We truly look for people who are goal oriented, who know what they want and can go after it, who are purposeful, right? They take purpose and pride and intentionality in everything they do. Proactivity, right? We don't want to tell people what to do. We want people to initiate. We want people to think of ideas and go after it. We want people who are creative, who can experiment, who can innovate, who can think outside the box and think from first principles. Um, and we truly want people who we enjoy being around, right? I think, the best way that someone put it to me when I was going through, the investment banking world, because that's what I did for a few years living in New York City before I moved out to Africa. They just told me, hey, listen, like when you go into these interviews, you just have to be cool enough for them to want to sit next to you at 3 a.m. in the morning. Like, just show them that you can be someone that they would enjoy the presence of, right? Because you
Yes.
can learn everything else, but just be a good person. And I think, that's really what we've tried to build our culture on the back of, right? Try to find people with the same values and morals that we have, which I just kind of enlisted to you. And of course, we have a few more. But more so than that, are they a good person? Is this someone that you would genuinely, take out to drinks, with your sister and your mom if you had to, right? And is this someone that you want to be around? And I think, when we kind of put all those things together, you create a very like-minded, motivated group of individuals, who really want to give back to the world. And I've realized that, A players, right, those who are the best at what they do in their fields, want to be surrounded by A players. And so we've even, built something into our culture where we let the team actually help us in the recruiting and hiring process, where we actually
Well,
go through culture interviews. And people on our team have the power to actually nullify a particular hire, which has actually been the case, right? This person has gone through all, you know, the parts of the process of our recruiting, but then we'll get to the culture interview, and someone says, "No, this is not someone that I'd want to work with. I did not learn anything new from this conversation, and I don't think they would add value to this company and organization. Let's keep looking."
Really
And
great.
yeah,
Love this. I love this idea of letting the people that work with you help being part of who's going to come. I know we used that at Facebook in the early
yes,
days, and
sir.
it was really, really effective on
Yes, sir.
building a team and who was there and everybody contributing at a similar level. And
Yes, sir.
I'm curious, how do you navigate pushback, whether it's within your company or the outside the company? How does Jansen navigate pushback from people?
Mm. Can you be maybe a bit more specific? Like what
Yeah, so
specific
somebody
back or yeah, tell me.
you're gonna develop something new, or you're going
Mhm.
to pivot something in the company, and
Mhm.
somebody says no, 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 we're not going to do that, or here's all the
Yeah.
reason you shouldn't, and they're
Mhm.
just as strong as you are. Maybe it's a peer that you're working with. How do you navigate that?
Yeah. So maybe I'll just, preface with some particular conversations that me and my co-founder have had, in and around this area, whether it is about pivoting, whether it's about, a significant choice that we have to make, whether it's operating internal, external. But I think, the one thing I'm super fond of, and this goes back to the values that we talked about from the very beginning, or what do you look for? What do you hire for? I think my co-founder and I, all the values that are articulated to you, that's inherent to our culture start with me and my co-founder, right? And so I think, we early on had a conversation about, why are we even working together, right? What is it about each other that we respect, and why we want to go into business together? And it was all the things that we had listed: the community, the communication, the honesty, the candor, right? To have hard conversations, even if you don't want to allow for us each and every single time that we do come to a choice that has to be made. I think enables us to kind of start from those basic principles, which
Yes.
enable a very objective, ego-less, honest conversation. Now, will go up sometimes, will it go down sometimes? Yes, right? Will he make a point and I make a point? Yes, right? But at the end of the day, we have utmost respect for one another. We listen and we hear one another. And we never feel as if our idea has to be right, right? No one's gonna die on the hilltop, right? You
Yes,
know those guys who, they know
I
they're wrong,
do.
don't know they're wrong, and they're still willing to die on the
I've
hilltop,
worked with
right?
many of them.
I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have. But that's the complete opposite of where we are, right? We have enough humility and respect for each other, where we can be very objective, very logical, and very and have a very critical thinking analysis, um, to really base our decision off of. And sometimes that means that, you have to wait a couple hours or a day to have a conversation. So it's not maybe emotionally tied, or gives yourself an opportunity to get in a different headspace or even just ponder, right? Because the first thing that you have to think about when making a decision, well, how soon do we have to make this decision, right?
Yeah.
And so, also thinking about the time is important, but I truly believe that we utilize those same values that we have as a company to have those hard conversations, which enable us to have very fruitful, and honest dialogue.
Yes. Tell me your boldest vision for FIXA in the next 5 years.
Yeah. FIXA is going to become the largest digital neobank across Africa, without a doubt. Without a doubt. So we'll be serving tens and millions of customers.
I have no doubt.
Yes, sir.
If resources weren't a constraint, you had all the resources in the world, what wild idea would you pursue?
That's a great question. Maybe I would challenge Mark Zuckerberg for these OpenAI engineers right now. That's a joke, but I probably would try to hire just some of the smartest people in the world, that have experience, exposure, expertise in the different industries and fields that we're operating in. So whether that's fintech, big data, um, HR, really would want to just surround myself with some of the best. And so I would use those resources to really, get exposure, access, to leverage their experiences and help us move as fast as we can.
Excellent. Excellent. When things get tough, what keeps you inspired?
Ooh, what keeps me inspired? Um, I would say it's two things. I think, the first one being the process. I think I used to, be quite infatuated with the destination. I think that was what I believed was my biggest motivator. But I think, 4 years into living across the world by yourself, I think you at a certain point have to have the very real conversation with yourself to start to love the process. And that's the day to day.
That's
That's the good, that's the bad, and everything in between. So, the first thing is the process. The process motivates me to be the best version of myself each and every single day. We all get the same 24 hours, no matter where it is in the world. And, I try my best to utilize those to the best of my ability, but find ways to get better and to critique at every instance. And then the second one is um, a lot of my inspiration comes from wanting to inspire others. So, the same question that you asked me about the role models or the mentors, and I went into that long spiel about Katlego Mapai at Yoko in South Africa, who helped me have this exposure and experience to want to even start something, is the same inspiration that I'm looking to create for others.
excellent.
And whether that's childhood friends who knew me from, being an athlete or someone from, a college classmate, right, that just knew me from around the way. And they look and say, oh, that guy's doing this, he's doing that. He wasn't even that smart, or he wasn't even, I just want to inspire them, right, to know that anything is possible, right? That if I can do it, they can do it as well. And so just knowing that I can um, help people see what's going on elsewhere in the world, help educate people, but most importantly, maybe help them see things differently, get a burst of inspiration and motivation to maybe do something that they've been longing to do. That's what I really hope to do. And if I can do that for one person, my job, my job is done. I think I've done.
You're inspiring the viewers right now, Jansen. So know that.
Yes, sir. I
This
appreciate it.
mindset, you're inspiring people as you're speaking. And I love this idea that you're learning and getting exposed to of the destination and remembering that you're on the journey. It's part of life's wisdom because we're here today. And some people didn't wake up this morning.
Yes,
Um,
sir. Very
so
true.
I'm curious, as a fairly young entrepreneur and doing great things, what advice would you give an emerging leader or somebody, a founder just getting started?
Mm. I think my first piece of advice for them would be to, get a great co-founder. I think, we're all familiar with the stats that about, 9 out of 10 obviously startups fail, but for more reasons than not, it's usually because of the co-founding relationship. And so I think it's imperative that you truly find someone that you admire, that you look up to, that you're inspired by, that you'll be able to work through the hardships because they will come, whether you plan them or not, and to be intentional about that and to make sure that your values and your morals as people align, right? I think that is very crucial for young entrepreneurs. And then, outside of that, I would say, start small. You don't always have to have, let's say, the full product in hand, right? And even if you did, you probably even wouldn't be happy about it, right? And so talk to customers, understand their pain points, understand their problems, you know, figure out the best way to develop a minimum viable product that's going to still cater to their needs or answer some of their problems, while still getting more answers, right? And so I think if you can keep digging into that, you'll be very successful. Your idea doesn't have to be the biggest in the world. It can be a small problem, right? For a big corporation or organization or industry, and just keep going into that because you never know where that might lead up. So, yeah, do the hard work, find a great co-founder and ask the right questions.
Jansen Durham, co-founder of FIXA. Thank you for being here on Opening Pathways today.
The pleasure is all mine, Tom. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and to my viewers, this is Opening Pathways, and I'll see you next time.